temperature outside has already dropped below -20 degrees Celsius. The last light faded from the sky hours ago, and the snow covering the Hindu Kush mountains shows no signs of stopping. Inside a mud brick home in one of Afghanistan's most remote highland villages, a family of 7 is preparing for another night. They have no central heating system, no gas line running beneath the floor, no electric radiator plugged into the wall. What they have instead is something most people would look at and completely misunderstand. A low clay structure in the center of the room, a thin layer of fabric draped across a wooden frame, and a fire that, by modern standards, should not be enough to keep anyone alive through a night like this. But it is. It has been enough for centuries. And the reason why will completely change the way you think about warmth, survival, and what we mean when we say a home is designed well. If you find yourself drawn to stories about forgotten engineering, traditional survival systems, and the kind of practical intelligence that modern life has slowly erased, then this channel is built exactly for you. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss a video like this one. What looks primitive from the outside is, in reality, one of the most thermally efficient domestic systems ever developed at altitude. This is not a story about poverty making do with less. This is a story about a culture that understood heat physics so precisely, so intuitively, that they built an entire way of living around a single elegant principle. Do not heat the room. Heat the people. To understand how revolutionary that idea truly is, you first need to understand what Afghanistan's winter actually means in the high valleys and mountain plateaus, where many of its rural families live. The Hindu Kush range stretches across the northeastern part of the country at elevations that regularly exceed 3,000 meters. In provinces like Bamiyan, Badakhshan, and Nuristan, winter does not arrive gradually. It arrives like a wall. Villages that had access roads in October become completely snowbound by December. Temperatures in January and February can plunge to -30 Celsius in the most exposed locations. Wind carries that cold through every gap in every structure it finds. And unlike the steppes of Central Asia or the Siberian plains where wood fuel can be abundant, many Afghan mountain communities have always operated with severe fuel scarcity. The landscape is rocky, semi-arid, and largely treeless above a certain elevation. Every piece of fuel has always mattered. Every degree of heat has always had a cost. That context is critical. Because what this family has built, and what their parents built before them, and their grandparents before that, was never designed to be charming or traditional for tradition's sake. It was designed to solve an exact problem. How do you keep a family warm through a 10-hour night when you have almost no fuel left, no electricity, no insulation in the modern sense, and outside temperatures that would kill an unprepared person within hours? The answer begins with a structure that most visitors would mistake for furniture. The sandali is a low wooden table, usually no more than 30 to 40 centimeters high, built from whatever timber was available locally. Over centuries, it evolved into a standardized form across much of Afghanistan and the broader Central Asian mountain region. Beneath the table, set directly into or just above the earthen floor, is a shallow clay or stone bowl. That bowl holds a small quantity of burning charcoal or dried dung fuel. Not a roaring fire, not a furnace. A controlled, slow-burning ember source that generates a steady, moderate heat. Over the table, a heavy quilt called a liaf is draped across the entire frame, hanging down to the floor on all sides, creating a sealed tent of trapped warm air directly under the fabric. The family members sit around the table with their legs beneath the quilt, their lower bodies inside the warm pocket, their upper bodies exposed to the ambient air of the room. At first glance, this seems like a simple arrangement, but the engineering logic behind it is far more sophisticated than it appears. The human body loses heat through several pathways simultaneously. The extremities, particularly the feet and lower legs, are among the most effective thermal radiators the body has. When those parts are cold, the entire body's core temperature drops faster. Conversely, when the lower body is kept warm, the cardiovascular system does not need to work as hard to maintain core temperature, and the perception of warmth extends to the whole person, even if the surrounding room air is cold. The Sandali exploits this physiological fact with precision. It is not trying to heat cubic meters of air, which requires enormous energy, and which escapes through every crack in a traditional mud brick structure. It is heating exactly the zone where the body's thermal vulnerability is highest. The quilt acts as a seal, and the low clearance of the table concentrates warm air in the smallest possible volume directly around the legs and feet. This is, in mechanical terms, a radiant floor-level heating tent, and it is powered by an amount of fuel that would barely heat a single room for an hour if burned conventionally. But here is where the system becomes genuinely remarkable, and where the first assumption you might have about it starts to break down. You might assume that the family sleeps in different rooms, retreating to separate spaces after the evening gathering. In a traditional Afghan Highland home, that assumption is wrong in a way that matters deeply to the whole system. The same room where the Sandali sits is often the room where the entire family sleeps during winter. Bedding is brought from storage and laid around the central table. The family does not sleep away from the heat source. They sleep around it, using their collective body warmth as a supplementary layer. A family of 7 generates significant passive heat, and in a room with mud brick walls that are sometimes half a meter thick, that heat does not leave quickly. The thermal mass of those walls absorbs warmth during the hours when the charcoal burns, then releases it slowly through the night as the fire gradually dims. The architecture and the heating system are not separate features of the home. They are one continuous mechanism. The mud brick walls deserve a moment of real attention here because they are one of the most misunderstood building materials in the world. Modern construction instinctively thinks of insulation in terms of resistance. How well does the wall block heat transfer? A thin foam panel scores high on resistance. Mud brick scores lower on that particular test. But mud brick is not primarily an insulator in the resistance sense. It is a thermal mass material. It absorbs heat slowly, stores it, and releases it slowly. The scientific measure for this is called thermal lag, meaning the delay between when heat is applied to one side of the wall and when that heat emerges on the other side. For a wall of compressed mud or adobe at typical Afghan construction thickness, that lag can be 6 to 8 hours or more. What that means in practice is this. The afternoon sun warms the south-facing wall throughout the day. The charcoal fire inside warms the interior surface through the evening. By the time the fire has gone cold in the early morning hours, the walls are still radiating stored warmth back into the room. The house is not leaking heat. It is delaying it, releasing it at exactly the point in the night when the external temperature is most dangerous and the fire has already been extinguished. This is passive thermal engineering, and it works so well that some researchers studying traditional Afghan and Central Asian construction have found that interior temperatures in well-maintained mud brick structures on winter nights can remain 10 to 15 degrees Celsius warmer than the outside ambient temperature, even with no active heating source. 10 to 15 degrees sounds modest until you remember that the starting point is -25. The wall buys the family time. The Sandali handles the rest. If you are watching this and realizing that this system is genuinely more sophisticated than it looked at the start, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. There is a lot more to this story, and the deeper we go, the more extraordinary it becomes. Now, the fuel question cannot be avoided, because it sits at the heart of why this system had to be so efficient in the first place. In forested lowland regions, firewood is abundant and cheap. But in Afghanistan's high-altitude villages above the tree line, Wood fuel has always been scarce and precious. Families historically relied on a combination of fuel sources that most urban observers would dismiss without a second thought. Dried animal dung, specifically from sheep, goats, and cattle, was collected throughout the autumn and shaped into dense cakes that could be stored and burned with low, steady heat. Dried thorny shrubs gathered from the surrounding hillsides contributed to the supply. Corn cobs, wheat straw compressed and dried, and in some regions, blocks of peat-like compressed soil from specific hillside deposits were all used as fuel. None of these burn like hardwood. None of them produce a roaring flame, but all of them, when managed correctly, produce the slow, sustained ember heat that the sandalee requires. The system was not designed for high-intensity fuel. It was designed specifically around the characteristics of low-intensity, long-burning fuel. The sandalee does not need a flame, it needs a glow. And that distinction is what made survival possible at altitude with almost no forest in reach. The charcoal used in the sandalee is often prepared from whatever wood scraps were available, burned down in a separate outdoor clay kiln during autumn while conditions still allowed it. Families who have access to any wood at all will convert it to charcoal rather than burn it raw, because charcoal produces more consistent heat, less smoke, and far longer burn time per unit of fuel. The charcoal bowl beneath the sandalee is typically replenished once in the evening and once more before the family sleeps, and then it is left to burn down through the night. A skilled family member, usually one of the elders who knows the fuel intimately, judges exactly how much charcoal to use, enough to carry heat through until morning, not so much that it burns hot and fast and exhausts itself by midnight. This is precision fuel management. It is not guesswork. It is accumulated knowledge passed across generations, refined by survival feedback over centuries. But the system has a dangerous side, and any honest account of the sandalee must acknowledge it directly. Carbon monoxide, the silent, odorless byproduct of burning charcoal in an enclosed space. Across the broader region where coal and charcoal heating is used indoors, carbon monoxide poisoning is a documented and recurring cause of death during winter months. The traditional Afghan home and its counterparts in Iran, Pakistan, and Central Asia evolved several architectural features that address this risk, though none of them eliminate it entirely. The most important is the tawa, or ventilation gap. Traditional Highland Afghan homes are not hermetically sealed. The thick mud brick walls are built with specific small openings near roof level that allow a slow, controlled exchange of air without creating a draft strong enough to chill the room significantly. These are not windows in the modern sense. They are deliberate gaps in the construction, sized through trial and the kind of collective learning that comes from understanding exactly what happened when previous builders got it wrong. The gap must be large enough to allow carbon monoxide to escape and fresh air to enter, but small enough that the thermal loss does not undermine the entire heating system. The positioning matters too. Because warm air rises, the gap near the ceiling creates a convective loop. The heaviest, coldest, most oxygen-depleted air settles near the floor where the charcoal sits, rises as it warms, and exchanges at the top of the room. The family sleeping at floor level remains in the freshest air layer. Some homes also use the design of the door itself as a supplementary ventilation mechanism. Doors in traditional Highland construction are often fitted loosely, not out of poor craftsmanship, but deliberately, so that a thin, slow infiltration of cold outside air enters at the base of the door throughout the night. Combined with the ceiling gap, this creates a passive air circulation system that manages carbon monoxide risk without mechanical fans, sensors, or any modern safety equipment. Is this foolproof? No. Families have always known that a fire left too large in a room sealed by heavy snowfall blocking the ventilation gaps is dangerous. The knowledge of how to manage this was not written in manuals. It was passed verbally, demonstrated practically, reinforced by the memory of what happened in homes where the balance was lost. The safety system was the community's collective awareness, and the architecture was its physical expression. The complexity of the full winter survival system only becomes clear when you follow the family through the entire 24 hours of a deep winter day, not just the night. Morning in a highland Afghan winter begins before full light. The sandali is usually cold or nearly cold by the time the first family member rises, because the overnight charcoal load was calculated to be just enough and nothing more. The first task is not preparing food, it is preparing heat. A small amount of new fuel is started, often using dried thorns or straw as kindling because they ignite quickly and bring the charcoal to temperature without wasting larger fuel reserves on a starting flame. While the sandali rekindles, water for tea is heated on a separate small stove, usually a simple clay or metal structure near the wall. Tea in this context is not a cultural preference, it is a thermal strategy. Hot liquid raises core body temperature quickly and efficiently, preparing the body for the cold exposure that comes with any activity outside the warm room. The family drinks before they work. This sequence is not arbitrary. It is physiologically sound. The daily outdoor tasks in deep winter are rationed carefully. Livestock, usually a small number of sheep and goats kept in an attached or adjacent shelter, sharing a wall with the main home, must be fed and checked each morning. That shared wall is not accidental. The body heat of even a small number of animals contributes meaningfully to the thermal environment of both spaces. A flock of 10 sheep generates collective warmth, equivalent to a modest heating source. Builders in these communities knew this. The placement of the animal shelter sharing a wall, particularly the north or windward wall, was a deliberate architectural choice that reduced heat loss from the most exposed side of the home while adding animal warmth from the interior side. Midday, when sunlight is available, is the most productive period for any outdoor work, but the primary focus shifts to fuel and water security. Snow must be gathered and melted for water if the village water source is frozen, which it frequently is. Fuel for the coming night must be checked, dried, and allocated. The afternoon sun, weak as it is at altitude in winter, is used to expose any remaining wet fuel to whatever drying warmth is available. Rooftops in traditional highland Afghan construction are flat and thick, specifically suited for spreading items to dry. The flat roof is not an aesthetic choice in a region of heavy snowfall. It is a working platform. Snow is cleared from it regularly, partly to prevent collapse under the load, and partly to expose the thermally massive roof surface to solar gain, which then conducts warmth downward into the living space below. By late afternoon, the family is moving back inside. The sandali is rebuilt for the evening. The heaviest textiles in the household, thick woven quilts and layered felt mats, are brought from storage or from where they were airing. The floor of the main room is laid with multiple layers. Felt first, for its insulating and cushioning qualities. Woven carpets over that, for warmth, and to create a dead air layer between layers. Then, individual bedding on top. The floor itself, beaten earth compacted over generations, has its own modest thermal mass. It holds whatever warmth the day produced and releases it slowly through the night. Food in deep winter follows a logic that is tightly connected to thermal management. High-calorie, fat-rich foods are not simply preferred because they taste good. They are consumed because the body processes fat as a slow-burning fuel for internal heat production. Bread baked on a clay griddle, dense and thick, provides sustained caloric energy. Dairy products, when available from the livestock, add fat content. Dried legumes and preserved vegetables from the autumn harvest complete a diet that is not abundant, but is specifically calibrated to maintain body temperature in a cold stress environment. The family's diet and the family's heating system are not separate survival strategies. They are two components of the same integrated solution. The children in the household are the clearest indicator of how well the full system functions, because children are the most thermally vulnerable family members. They lose heat faster, they cannot generate as much internal warmth from physical labor, and they sleep longer, meaning they spend more total time in the thermal care of the home. In a well-managed traditional Highland home, children sleep closest to the chandelier, wrapped in the most layers, with adult bodies on the outer perimeter of the sleeping arrangement. This is not a codified rule. It is parental instinct, expressed as a consistent spatial practice that, across millions of families over centuries, became a cultural norm. The arrangement of bodies in the sleeping room is itself a thermal system, with the most vulnerable at the center and the most heat-capable on the outside. There is one more element of this winter survival picture that almost no outside account of Afghan rural life includes, and it may be the most important of all. The social structure of the extended family, with multiple generations living under one roof throughout winter, is not simply a cultural tradition or an economic necessity. It is a thermal strategy. More bodies mean more passive heat generation. More adults mean more labor capacity for the daily fuel gathering and snow clearing tasks. More elderly family members mean more accumulated knowledge about how the system has been managed in every type of winter, including the rare catastrophic winters when fuel runs short and temperatures fall beyond the expected range. The intergenerational household is itself a survival mechanism. The grandmother, who knows exactly when the charcoal glow is becoming dangerous, who can read the smell of the air and judge when the ventilation gap needs to be opened slightly wider, is not performing a sentimental tradition. She is executing a critical safety function based on knowledge accumulated across decades. When outside observers have described these homes as overcrowded, they have mistaken functional density for poverty. In the thermodynamics of survival at altitude with scarce fuel, human bodies occupying shared space is not a social problem to be solved. It is the solution. The full winter life system of a remote Afghan Highland family, when you follow it through its complete daily and nightly cycle, reveals an architecture of survival that integrates building materials, fuel management, human biology, animal husbandry, diet, sleeping arrangement, ventilation logic, and social structure into a single unified response to an extreme environment. No single part of it works in isolation. Remove the thick walls, and the charcoal burns through before morning. Remove the quilt seal on the chandelier, and the fuel efficiency collapses. Remove the shared sleeping arrangement, and the thermal balance of the room shifts against the children. Remove the livestock from the shared wall, and the windward side of the home becomes a weak point in the thermal envelope. Every element reinforces every other element. That integration is what makes this system not just impressive from a historical curiosity perspective, but genuinely instructive. Engineers studying passive solar design, thermal mass construction, and low-energy heating for cold climates have found that the principles embedded in traditional Afghan Highland construction align remarkably well with modern understanding of heat transfer, thermal lag, and human thermophysiology. The people who built these homes did not have the vocabulary of material science, but they had something that produces the same results over a long enough time horizon. They had the accumulated pressure of survival, and they kept the solutions that worked. Modern attempts to introduce external heating systems into remote Afghan villages have had a mixed record precisely because they often treat the heating problem as an isolated engineering challenge rather than as one thread in an integrated survival fabric. Imported metal stoves that burn hotter but require more fuel can actually reduce a family's thermal security if they exhaust limited fuel reserves faster than the old system did. Electric space heaters, introduced without reliable power infrastructure, create a dependency that the original system never had. The traditional system's greatest virtue was not that it was warm enough. Its greatest virtue was that it was resilient. It functioned with whatever fuel was available, in whatever quantities were available, without any external supply chain, without any component that could not be repaired with local materials, and without any knowledge that was not already present within the household. That is the standard against which any replacement system should be measured. And most modern alternatives, when held to that standard, fall short. Think about what you just witnessed in this family's daily cycle. Every choice in that home, from the thickness of the walls to the placement of the animal shelter, from the size of the ventilation gap to the order of the bedding layers, from the composition of the evening meal to the position of the children in the sleeping room, was the answer to a specific question about how to keep people alive in a place where the environment offers almost no margin for error. There was no central planning committee that designed this. There was no architect who drew blueprints. There was a mountain, and there was a winter, and there were families who either figured out how to answer every part of that challenge or did not survive to pass their methods on. What remains is not a random collection of habits. It is the distilled wisdom of survival, tested across more winters than any of us can count, and refined to a level of functional precision that deserves genuine respect. The next time you see a mud brick home in a high mountain village, and your first instinct is to see something simple, or something poor, or something left behind by history, pause for a moment. Look again at the walls, at the low table in the center of the room, at the heavy quilt draped over it, at the small ember glowing in the bowl beneath. You are not looking at a primitive attempt at warmth. You are looking at an engineering solution to one of the hardest thermal challenges on Earth, solved with materials that cost nothing, powered by fuel that weighs almost nothing, and maintained by knowledge that requires no electricity, no supply chain, and no outside help whatsoever. You are looking at a system that has kept families warm through some of the coldest nights on the planet, night after night, for centuries. That is not a small thing. That is one of the most quietly extraordinary human achievements you will ever see. If this story changed the way you see traditional survival systems and the intelligence hidden inside them, please hit that like button and subscribe, so you never miss a video like this one. And I want to hear from you in the comments. What other traditional house, survival method, remote community, extreme climate system, or forgotten way of life do you want us to explore next? Every comment helps this channel find stories that deserve to be told. Leave your suggestion below, and we will see you in the next one.